This is now our third time doing this. And how's it going?
The ride here was like no talking.
Yesterday, and on our way to our first event, we were like driving through Laurel Canyon and going, I guess we should talk about what we're going to say. But today we don't. Today we just wing it.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. I think like the question that everybody has off the hand is, we're both writers, we're married, we have books out on the same day. Did we plan this? And the answer?
Yes.
The answer is no. I wish we'd been smart enough to I wish we'd been smart enough to plan this, because how fun like
It would have been great.
has this been?
Different publishers, different editors. I think the Celebrants was actually scheduled to come out a little bit before Big Gay Wedding, and then the stars just aligned, and it's really been lovely. It's great for me. This is your fourth book, and I can turn to you and say, "Is this normal? Are these people normal?"
I don't know about these people. They seem really nice. What is not normal is you and I just having our dinner conversation and all these people staring. That seems abnormal. No, there's no way we could have plotted this, in a million. I think we even wrote the books at slightly different times. You finished first. Good for you. I was tinkering right up until they pried it out of my hands, which is how it works. But why don't you tell us a little bit about Big Gay Wedding?
Big Gay Wedding. So Big Gay Wedding is kind of a cross between Schitt's Creek and Fall with a Bride, and it's about a conservative mom in a small town who runs a rescue ranch for misfit animals, clashing with her gay son who wants to have his big wedding at the family farm. And Big Gay Wedding is inspired by our little gay wedding, kind of. Stephen and I got married in the thick of COVID, and I had just finished chemo for testicular cancer. I'm fine now. I have a testicular implant that's huge and much more efficient than the original. I'm doing great. I was sick with chemo, and everything was shut down from COVID, and I had proposed to Stephen in the acknowledgments of A Star Is Born. And
Your first novel.
Yeah, and we had talked about getting married, so we were pretty ready, and then we started doing the pros and cons of having a ceremony, and one of the items was that our families probably couldn't attend because of COVID, and we thought, that sounds great. That sounds great.
In fact, people were already starting to get vaccines. I was like, we got to do this now.
All right.
And I just want to say, since this is being live streamed tonight, that some of my family is tuning in. We
Oh.
love you. We would have loved for you to be there.
Yes. So we had a little gay wedding. Stephen found this house in our hometown of Palm Springs that was from the 60s, hadn't been remodeled since the 60s. So it was all the cool mid-century stuff, so shag carpet and crazy wallpaper and
Jukebox.
so we rented that for the day, and it was like
We had a 3-minute ceremony and a 4-hour photo shoot. So, which is what a gay wedding should be.
And then after A Star Is Born, my editor and I were chatting about what would be next, and so we just kind of landed on what would it look like if instead of our little gay wedding, we had a big gay wedding, and it was in Louisiana, where I'm from, and in a small town where there's maybe the gay wedding vibe isn't accepted, and maybe a town's not ready for that. Maybe a mom isn't ready for that. So Big Gay Wedding really is a coming out story for a mother, coming out as accepting and loving her gay son. And that's what you'll find in these pages, along with some laughs, I hope, and some people have called it a tearjerker. So brace yourself.
Not with that, your mom?
Yeah. She's very
It
supportive.
is though. Is that you panting?
That's
Oh.
Although it's not beneath.
We are learning a lot about each other doing this. Maybe he's a heavy panter. I've never noticed before. You can tell we're talking about you.
What is the Celebrants about, sir?
Well, thank you for asking.
Yep.
First of all, we have these color-coordinated Sharpies. Did you notice this? Which I'm like obsessed over.
Very cool.
The Celebrants was inspired by early in the pandemic. We were sheltering at home, and we were like most couples, I think, scrolling through Netflix, going, what are we gonna watch tonight? Little did we know that would be the next like 3 years. But was looking for comfort movies that I remembered loving and hadn't seen for a long time. And we settled on The Big Chill, which is a movie that I think everyone remembers, where it's a glossy cast of future Oscar winners. Although Glenn Close, your day is coming. And it's soundtrack of Motown hits, but I didn't remember a lot of it beyond that. Except that it was about a group of college friends who come back together when one of their own dies, and they're stressed about middle age and everything, that growing older and what the stressing about the back half of their lives. And everyone in that movie was 35 years old was what was stressing them out about being middle aged. I was looking at my 50th birthday, like staring me in the eyes. And so I was like, oh, hell no, we're not doing 35. So The Celebrants is about a group of college friends who reunite periodically over the years when they need one another. And the modern day story that is framed around is when we're all turning 50. And I think, like, in the original film, Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote that, The Big Chill referred to that long stretch of time after people were married, they had their kids, they owned a home, they had their career, and then not a lot changed between then and retirement, or until the kids, until they were empty nesters, till the kids left the house. And that's so different than the way things are today, where people are more like, perhaps have multiple marriages or blended families, multiple careers, reinventions of themselves. It's just, we don't work for one company until we get the pension anymore. And so there's all sorts of these great dramatic stories to tell in that middle part of life, where it's just not this sort of metaphorical parking lot anymore. So that's sort of where the story began.
Today Show pick. Steven's going to be on the Today Show later in June, talking all about it.
I bought a new suit, which I'm very excited about, but it's very yellow.
Very yellow.
Which might be too literal, but it literally feels like a morning. It feels like today. So I might have to do some shopping between now and then. I also put it on and I felt like, didn't Curious George and his owner have a yellow suit? Yeah. That's what I felt like. I should have a monkey. I'm gonna go on that show.
Sell those books, maybe.
Yeah. So no, I'm very, very excited about that, and it's quite a surprise and an honor. So yeah.
Do y'all have some questions?
We can talk all day, but I'm like, we
have jokes.
Do you juggle? Yeah. Anybody have any questions? Come on, we talk to each other.
Yay!
Since you're both married and writers, I want to hear about how you guys manage the schedules, and someone's on a deadline, someone's freaking out, because I live with another writer. And
do you? Oh my God, we have to. Okay, Jenny, we have to figure this out.
I'm curious to hear.
Yeah, I think, because there are a lot of writers here, I see, and I think a lot of people assume it would be a nightmare to be in a relationship with another writer.
Yes.
Is your relationship a
nightmare? No, it's not a nightmare, but sometimes it gets a little intense there at certain times.
It can, yeah. I think I enjoy it. Well, our house is quiet, which I like, and I find that conducive to work. Especially during the pandemic, I was very aware of my writer friends who had to share workspace with their spouses, suddenly, and they might need to be on loud conference calls all day, and I didn't that would drive me nuts. So first of all, I'm glad that our house is quiet. Beyond that,
we have 2 dogs. They're in charge of our.
They're also writers.
So Raindrop and Shirley, and so they get me up about 6, and then we go outside and we do our walk and all that stuff.
There's some passive aggression in this. That they get me up at 6. This is going to be like marriage counseling in front of everybody.
There are times where I get them up. I'm like, at 6 o'clock, let's live.
Yeah, I'm not getting anyone up at 6 o'clock.
So the mornings are kind of my productive time, and my writing style tends to be, I want to be inspired and excited. So sometimes that means going for a walk or something like that to kind of get my thoughts in order. And I think you're more of like a, let's get this done kind of, right? And is that you?
I'm an artist. Yeah, I have a word count goal that I try to hit. And I think my quiet times are in the evening sometimes, you go to bed earlier to read or whatever, and I'll go back to work in the evening. But yeah, I think I think the irony is that you're more structured when it comes to outlining and doing the preparation and pre-work and stuff like that, and I'm more structured in terms of work ethic and but I'm a pantser. I'm a classic pantser, you know, which is sort of fly by the seat of your pants, you know, a little bit. I don't outline as much. So
and we also understand our stresses, I think. So like the deadline thing, or we could be eating dinner or watching TV, and one of us has an idea, and like I got to go write. So I think we get that. One
of the hardest parts is like if going to a dinner party or something like that, we hear some really great line of dialogue or something, and we could be like, I'm taking that. Yeah. Sure. I claim it. So that's always fun. But I don't know. How do I find?
You know, we sort of carved out that same thing. Like I'm the morning dog person, and then he stays up late nights. And then I was like, we each have the house a little bit alone. You know what I mean? Like I have it in the mornings, and then it's quiet, and then I do go to bed earlier than
Yep.
So that's how we.
Thank God for animals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for multiple reasons, right? So like it's interesting to be in a relationship with another writer because it can be a very solitary job at times. It can feel very individual. So it helps to have, even if we're not working together, we're sort of working side by side. It does make it a little less lonely. It's also a very sedentary job, and that's where the dogs come in, because it is really nice when you have some cold nose pressed up against you. Or like, it's time to get out of the chair, come play, get up, let's walk. That's also helpful to the creative process too, I think. Yeah.
A question, and this isn't meant to be dark, but apparently there's other writers in the room, so it'll make sense. I haven't read either book, but there are plenty of books.
They've been out 24 hours.
Well, I came here with my wallet. So.
Okay.
But when I'm reading, there are always moments in many books where like it makes me ache, and because I can relate so much to a character. Were there moments in your own books in which that happened and that you can tell us about without any spoilers?
Without spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like, how do you process that afterwards?
And then just to add on to that time, but there are moments when you're reading someone else's work where you ache for another reason, out of like, oh, I wish I could have written that, or I wish I had written that too. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess where my mind goes is there are a few scenes in there where I made myself emotional, and that's not like a toot your own horn thing. I really, people can read the same paragraph and have a whole different reaction to it, but I tend to love when an underdog finds his or her voice, and so animals, I'm very attached to animals. So if there's some way to incorporate, have an animal mirror one of the characters' journeys, I'm really into that, and that can make me emotional. And I notice that when I'm feeling that, I try to lean into it. So that's what came to mind for me.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like my first book. So we've been together for 10 years, and we were both writers in that we wrote before we met. We were not published before we met. And so my first book was about a dog, an animal. We all know what happens in dog books, sadly. Yeah, you're gonna cry right now. Okay. So, but I remember giving you the manuscript, and you sent me a photo. I still have like tears coming down your face when you got to.
I am amazing.
Yeah.
I am an amazing partner.
There's that passive aggressive.
No, I was trying to be sincere.
You are an amazing partner. All right. I could sign that. Yeah. So yeah, that does happen. I think more so. I think we're really competitive about getting laughs. I think that's when I get really jealous, when I'm like, oh, that's a really great line. I wish I, or that's a joke. I wish I thought of.
It's one of the hard parts of, well, for me, I'll speak for me, and you can, getting notes from Steve is he will try to punch up my jokes. And hey, this joke is already funny. That kind of thing. So it's kind of sweet.
Yeah, that is all. That is terrible. I do like giving notes to each other too. That's a whole other.
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys do that at all. But it's always like, is he asking for notes as a spouse? Like just support, keep going, or are you asking for legitimate notes from another writer, or some edits or punch ups, who knows? And maybe I don't always read the room correctly.
Isn't that true with all of us?
Yeah. Peggy.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know that the town is on strike, the writers are on strike right now. And when they get everything they want and deserve and the town opens back up, being positive, both of your books, and congratulations on the Thurber Award. That's are both of A Star is Born and Gunkel destined for the bigger small screen?
I hope so. I'm with you in standing with the writers and hoping that the studios get their shit together and yeah, I hope after
Yeah, I will say, I'm straddling two worlds right now. There is no union for novel writers. This writing books does not come with dental. I am also a proud member of the WGA, and so I, stand with them currently. And does David Zaslav live over here? Who lives over here that we get this taken care of? Right? Someone's got to be on the west side. I'm just going to start going door to door and be like, get back to the table. But yes, I hope it will. A movie is in the works. I'm hoping it'll all come together quickly, but the strike has to be resolved first. Yeah.
Ted's, the only things I've written is for Investment Magazine, so I don't have an editor. And it seems like every time we see a movie that involves the conflict between writers and publishers, to give us some insights as to what's the struggle like to work with them, the push back, the give and take. Describe it.
Well, I wrote a book called The Editor, so I'm just going to plug that right now. Which is a young writer's relationship with his very famous book editor, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, who had an incredible 15-year career as a book editor after the death of her second husband. And that was sort of great to write about that relationship because, and that was, it sort of mirrors a mother-son kind of relationship, or a parent-child in a way. I remember, and I'll let you jump in. I remember my very first book, because I had come from screenwriting before I had ever written a novel. And my very first book, I had a meeting in person. I was in her office with my editor, and she was going over some notes, and she said something like, "But I defer to your creative authority." And I almost fell out of my chair because in 15 years of trying to be a screenwriter, no one had ever deferred to my, my anything. So people were asking, "Oh, you're going to write another book, or are you going to go back to screenwriting?" I thought it was like, books it is. But no, it is, it's a relationship built on trust, and hopefully, I'm with a remarkable editor that I just trust what she has to say, and the very few times I strike it out on my own and don't take a note of hers, I kind of know in the back of my head she's right and I'm just being obstinate. But I think it helps to have someone that you really trust, and trust has the same vision for the story that you're trying to tell. If the relationship is like this, you're probably not with the right editor.
I feel the same way. I feel really lucky. The editor I worked with for A Star is Born and for Big Gay Wedding was very supportive, and in many cases saved me from myself. So in Big Gay Wedding, there's a character named Pawpaw, and that's the only crazy Southern name. But in my life, I did have a Pawpaw, and a Mama, and a Nini, and a Nanan. But it's just the Pawpaws in there. And in the book, he's sort of a wise character. He lives in a nursing home. He's very progressive. They all watch Glee, and he's a little affectionate with the other ladies in the nursing home,
That happens.
That happens. My editor was like, do we really need that scene with vanilla pudding? And I'm like, all right, let's got that.
Suddenly the book is not so vanilla.
Yeah. Or sometimes the language can be bad, like too many, do we need this many F words or C words? I don't know the rules with the internet, but so yeah, for me, it has felt like a sort of saving for myself in some ways. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah. Yes.
Hey.
So if you're going to read, I would like to for you to read the excerpt that I put in.
Oh, thank you.
Just kidding. So it's been a while since I read Lily and the Octopus, but I believe that fictionalized versions of each of you appear in each of your first novels. I don't know if I'm correct in that, but I'm interested if it's true and why you decided to do that.
Yeah, I think if anyone is not sick of us after tonight, then yeah, at the very end of my, not spoiler alert, a little bit, of my first novel, the narrator meets a character that's inspired by Byron. In fact, the character is named Byron, which we had a conversation about because I wanted to end with this poem by Lord Byron, and it wouldn't have made sense if the character's name were Arthur or Phil or something else. And so we had this conversation like, will this be straight? What will and we settled on that, like, yes, let's do it. And I remember feeling good about it until the publisher came back with book club questions that they were publishing in the back of the book. And one of the questions was, what do you think of the Byron character? Do you think he and the narrator have any future together? And I was like, no, we're in book clubs everywhere, weighing in on our relationship. And perhaps all of you can weigh in again after seeing us tonight. But yeah, at the end of A Star Is Born.
Yeah, so and A Star Is Born, my first was inspired by the time I was assistant to Carrie Fisher, and so it started where the character just met her, the actress, and then goes through to when he makes a decision about his career future. And in real life, part of my decision about not working for Carrie anymore was because I met Steven and I wanted to invest in our relationship, and Carrie was about to go do the new Star Wars in London, and I didn't want to leave. And so in the book, there's a similar thing where the character is not named Steven; he's named Reed. But
I actually like that. That's okay.
Okay, all right.
Change approved.
Yeah. But you're right. Yeah. So it's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of fun. that we
We're
both got to
gross.
do that.
We're gross. Like not only like that.
We're
Like
gross.
he proposed in the acknowledgments at the end of A Star Is Born, and I spoiler alert, accepted the proposal in the acknowledgments for my book, The Guncle, and now both proposal and acknowledgement, as well as, you're right, the beginnings of our relationship are chronicled in 2 different books, and they're all in the Library of Congress, which is like very strange. Yeah, it's too cute. We gotta stop it.
Yeah, we gotta have a big fight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it should be live streamed.
That's right.
Yeah. Any other questions? 2 here.
I was just gonna mention I really enjoyed the editor, and one of the things I loved about it for my brain, because I'm actually, even though I went to graduate school, I'm actually a terrible reader, and the fact that it was in a different time, like in a different place, and I spent a lot of time on Cape and blah blah blah, but it just really put me there. But then, okay, this is coming on like a compliment. I can't stand it when people just compliment, but I'm actually asking.
I don't. Take your time. Can the live stream can we move this?
Oh my god! But ultimately, the book was like about something greater than just the circumstance of like. And I was dying to like look up Jackie Kennedy's like actual career, but I wanted it to be on its own. Can you just talk a little bit about like using a different time, like as a context of your narrative?
Yeah, so that book takes place in largely in 1992 to 1994. And I have gone into bookstores and seen that in the historical fiction section. Since I was in college then, like that feels like a punch right there, So, and it's like it's another time, magical faraway place called the 90s.
Yeah.
It was incredibly, it was both helpful and challenging, right? Because the famous example is the movie Home Alone. Like if cell phones existed, that movie is over in one scene.
Yeah.
Right. And so, likewise, it was great sometimes to have to, in that book, in addition to being about his relationship with his very famous editor, it's about his relationship with the young writer's relationship with his mother. And so I had to put them in the room together to have those very kind of like emotional scenes, because you can't shoot off a text. You can't call from it's harder to have conversations in ways where you're not sort of face to face. And that was very helpful for the drama in that book. But then I also had to stop and think like, oh, wait a minute, how did someone actually write in that time? You don't just pull out a laptop, necessarily at that time. And I had to think back, how did I write papers in college and whatnot? And that was really interesting too. There were a couple other funny examples, like having to we should go back and be like, how much did a phone call, a payphone cost? And that was a dime still? Was it 25 cents?
I thought it was awesome that you put the ads of the buses in the scenes. And I was like, oh man. Because I actually lived on McDougal in too. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Carrie.
Hi. I've read The Celebrants already, which
Mhm.
you know I love, and I'm currently reading Big Gay Wedding, which I am loving so much. You guys know I'm both big fans of you, and you both write with such heart and insight. So I was just wondering, like, when you're writing, do you go in with the insight, or do you find it as you're going? And do you feel changed by writing the books, or do you feel like you are already the person who was able to write the book when you started it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Do you want to?
I'm a big like therapy self-help guy, also UFOs and other things. But so when an interesting thing happened with A Star Is Born, and there's a character in there named Therapista who gives advice, and I had gone from my regular therapist to like this
Super therapist.
she's probably a high-end grifter,
Oh.
but I love her, and so my philosophy changed, and so I do notice that Therapista's philosophy sort of started to change too. And one rewarding thing that came from that is that I treated myself to the ebook version of my own book after it came out to see what sections people were highlighting. And they were highlighting the Therapista stuff. So they were highlighting the stuff that
You got people hooked on a grifter.
High-end
High end.
grifter.
This is the West Side. High end. Yeah.
And that was really meaningful for me to have people respond like that. And so I don't, and I'm really proud of that these little things that I learned from my therapist and from this high-end grifter that helped my life maybe is meaningful to other people.
Yeah, and I think I am not into self-help and therapy and all. I mean, I like this is a flaw in me, but I writing is kind of my therapy. That sounds so dumb, but I think like many writers that we write to kind of understand. We write our way to an understanding of something. And another thing that had happened when I was sitting down to start this book is I had lost one of my best friends from college to breast cancer, and so that idea, I think there is something about losing a contemporary. For the first, or a close contemporary like that, that makes you think about your own mortality in a way that, say, losing a parent or something doesn't quite, because there is like a natural order of things sometimes. But with friends, you know, particularly in this middle age, you know, I have friends who are 20 years older, I have friends who are 20 years younger, and there's no kind of deal. So I was sort of writing to figure that out, and there is something about that group of college friendships, particularly, or it doesn't have to be college, it could be high school, or people you knew when you were young, who knew you before you were married or before you had the career, and also know the dreams that you had and what you wanted your life to be. And if they're not the same, like they're sometimes the bridge to help you reconcile those two versions of yourself. And so losing one of them can really set you adrift. And so this is a book, you know, very much about you know, about that, and a little bit of, you know, about grief and grieving. And it's interesting, you know, I think, you know, there's a lot of talk about how artists are going to talk about or write about the past few years that we've been through. And I think, you know, the interesting thing for me is grief is something that we're all kind of in the throes of after the past few years. Even if we haven't lost a person, we have lost time, we have lost togetherness, we have lost finances, you know, like there's a lot of, you know, opportunity. And so I think like we're all grieving something. So it's very interesting I think this is a COVID book in that these characters have this pact to come together when they're needed to tell each other how much they mean to one another. And if writing the book has changed me, it's like I've started telling people what they mean to me now. Because I think that's what I've learned from the past couple of years and from writing this book. So I'm just a big mush now in a really annoying way. I love you. I love you all. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
So one of the things that I really loved about the Gunkel was how you highlighted kind of the essence of Palm Springs as someone who has visited several times. It's like, oh, you're talking about like places that are super familiar, like, oh, I've been to that restaurant. So My question for you, Stephen, is where does the Celebrants take place? And then question for both of you is how do you guys decide what elements of real places are you going to incorporate into your stories?
Yeah, the Gongo has been a real surprise in that I have hosted, well, I haven't hosted, they haven't come to my house, but they book clubs from all over the country, like Denver, Chicago, groups, these book clubs are all coming to Palm Springs and doing the things that are in the Gongo and going to the places. And I was like, those are not my favorite restaurants. No, I love Cheekies. That's the exception. Well, like Lulu's or something. You know what and now I'm glad I didn't put my favorite restaurants in because they're hard enough to get into already. But it's fun to make a character out of place as well, a little bit. You know, in that existence, you know, Palm Springs is a place that more people associate, I think, with retirement than with raising kids. So it was fun to put kids there in that, you know, in that surrounding. The Celebrants largely takes place in Big Sur, which is where these reunions take place. And I don't know why, other than I've spent some time there and I love it, and it seems like a very there's something, you know, here they're all standing on the deck of the house in Big Sur, and there's something about this that just feels kind of aspirational and like I want to be there. I want to be in Big Sur standing on this deck, you know, overlooking the water like that, and hopefully it feels that way for readers too.
Big Gay Wedding takes place in a town outside of New Orleans that's called Mater, but that's not a real place. I grew up in a small town called Folsom, the same as the prison in California. It was a prison for me. It was and I named it something different, you know, because I didn't want anyone's feelings to get hurt. But it does mirror my experience in Folsom. It's just like a rural town with people with really big hearts, but also some misguided, maybe religious stuff that holds them back from in this case, from a mom from being fully accepting of her son and all that stuff. So that's why I changed the name there.
Yeah.
This is purely selfish, but I want everyone in this room to know that Byron is also a brilliant playwright. And so I just want to know, is Tilda Swinton Answers an Ad on Craigslist going to be remounted?
Well, yeah, we're available. We are available and ready. Yeah. So yeah, I'll keep you posted for sure. And if you guys follow me on Instagram, I'll post about it. That's very sweet. We had a great time with that play. It started
traveled the world with it.
Yeah,
it started in our living room.
A dumb idea in our living room.
Yeah.
And
these were probably also dumb ideas started in our living room.
Take your dumb ideas, leave it. Yeah. Like truly, I do always say, like, just keep going. And I'm gonna say this is where you are a wonderful partner, because I had the first chapter of my first book, Lily and the Octopus. I think I was thinking of it as a short story, and I gave it to Byron to read, and he was like, "No, go write chapter 2." And I think it was because it was early in our relationship, and I was probably a little needy, and you were like, "Let's give him a project." But it was like, also, like, men are dumb, and they're like, want to impress, and they're like, "All right, we'll go write chapter 2." And anyway, it became Lily and Octopus. And you know, all credit to Byron for seeing that vision, because I didn't have that belief in myself, but he saw that. Conversely, he came to me and said, "I have this idea for a play. It's called Tilda Swinton Answers an Ad on Craigslist." And I said, that's more like a skit. And then you went and proved me wrong. I wrote a full-length play, and you traveled the world, including go to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival twice, 2 years, you know, and really incredibly funny play. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Which I felt guilty. When I was accepting the Thurber Award, I had to acknowledge I'm not even the funniest writer in my own house. You know? But somehow I was being awarded for American humor, and I'm not even the best humorist.
That's not true.
In our home.
Stephen's brilliant, but you know, I'm not sure that this is the case with the Tilda thing, but sometimes there is something about struggle and strife and someone saying no that motivates you, or some of this art that I did previously in other works were because I was in a job I hated, and I was like, I gotta do something to get out of here. So sometimes that kind of thing can be the motivation, and I say just use it.
Yeah.
But I don't know what I'm talking about. What's up?
Hey.
Which show is better, tonight's or last night's?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Because-
God. I
Just
sound like
kidding.
a full
Just
groupie. Well, I wasn't brave enough to ask a question last night.
Okay.
So, you've both written about real people as characters in your books. You wrote about Jackie Onassis, and you wrote about Carrie Fisher, a thinly veiled version of Carrie Fisher. How do you approach writing about real people and historical people as characters, especially like, I assume you never met Jackie?
I did, yeah, I did not meet, sadly,
Right. So like how do you characterize real people, and how do you characterize someone you knew and worked with, but who also exists in the collective minds of so many people?
So yeah, the way this has been perhaps interesting because you have someone who you had personal knowledge of, and I have someone who I was just researching.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, for me, truly my experience with Carrie was a delight. And it was life-changing. I was really depressed when I met her, and here she comes with all this color and all of this life, and not a boring moment to be had, not a second of the day that was not without like, what the fuck is happening? So every experience with her was really a peak experience, and even things that were just like a typical job that were hard were still like she didn't have a mean bone in her body, like that kind of thing. So taking the spirit of someone like that and putting it on the page is kind of I don't want to say easy, but it's it's different than if someone is a monster. And you have to kind of rearrange it and make them different. But it's a little bit for me the same as The Town. So like making Folsom into Mater, you want the spirit of
I
that
thought you meant
thing.
the Ben Affleck movie.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I was like, is it? Did she rob a bank?
Y'all seen that movie? So it's capturing the spirit of something and
Yeah, but you also created a character which allowed you then to have a little more freedom with the story. I think
it's
one
full of
thing
imagination.
interesting with using a real character is like sometimes I would want Mrs. Onassis to say or do something for the purposes of the story, and I knew, in my head and my heart that Mrs. Onassis never said or would say something like that, and so I had to write a way around that, that felt more authentic, and. I felt a great responsibility, so I did an enormous amount of research, including talking to some people who had worked with her, and both as an author and as a coworker. Like that's really interesting. Like, did she ever change the toner, or did she let somebody else? And so there was all these sort of fun things to think about, but I had the question framed to me once, like, do you have, as a writer, did you have the right to put Jackie in a story? And sure, she's the definition of a historical, a famous person, right? So we have the fiction is filled with examples of real life historical figures worked into fiction. Yes, we have, but I always have to ascertain, are they asking me a moral question? Do I have the legal question? Do I have the right, or a moral question too? And that answer is different for every writer, I think. But all I can say is I try to approach it with as much respect and authenticity as I could. Yeah. But there's no doubt it's each of our sort of interpretations of these people.
Hi guys, Byron, I haven't read yours, but I can't wait. Stephen, I have read yours and I loved it. I was curious when you were approaching the reunion question or the big chill question, how you came up with the funeral idea, because I thought it was brilliant. And when you said it to me, I was like, oh, it's a reunion book. And then I read it and I was like, this is so unique and inventive that it took a reunion book to a different place. So I was just curious where that came from.
Yeah, so the characters in the book have a pact that they make when they are still in college. On the eve of graduation, one of the sixth friend in the group dies from suicide, and they make this pact, like, we're about to graduate, we're about to spread out, who knows what life is going to throw at us, we will come together at a moment's notice. We'll come back together at the lowest point in each person's life when they feel the, and we're going to throw their funeral for them so they can be alive to experience it, thinking that if only their friend had been there at his funeral and heard how much he was loved, he might have made a different choice. And so they want to tell their friends, you know, while they're there to hear it, how much they were loved. You know, when my friend from college passed away, you were actually in Edinburgh with the play. And then we had a long-standing trip to, like, I was going to come meet you, see the last few performances of the play, and we had this Italian trip planned afterwards. And I hadn't seen you for like a month, and the funeral was going to fall, and I had to make a choice. Like, do I go to the funeral, or do I go on this trip that we had planned? And everybody said, you know, funerals are for the living. You know, funerals are for the living. She would want you to go. She would want you to be on the trip. And that having that hammered at funerals are for the living. It just like that was enough of a trigger to make me think, what if, you know, what if they really were? Yeah. Yeah. So you never know where ideas kind of come from.
God, that was a great answer.
On the drive home, do we give each other a grade now?
We do, like, was I a fool?
Should I wear? Yeah, should I wear my hair up or should I wear my hair down? I don't have any stress. Good. Well, any final questions, or is that? Yay! Well, thank you all for coming out. And thank you for supporting independent bookstores. Allow us to have new bookstores that are opening and thriving and whatnot. It's so great to have you all here and to support programming that you can all bring, so you can keep having offers back. Thank you so much.